Okay. Awesome. It looks like a lot of people are getting on, so I'm going to go ahead and start. And I'd first like to start by thanking everybody for joining. Last webinar, we discussed testing, transmission, symptoms, and prevention of COVID-19. One of the key variables that we identified the last time was the immune system that could potentially prevent us from having a severe COVID-19 infection. Today's topic is the effect of inflammation and food and stress on the immune system. So today I ask that everyone keep their microphones muted and that you type any questions that you may have that come up during this webinar in the question and answer section. We have received your questions and hope to answer as many as possible during today's webinar. And today we are lucky enough to have two panelists, and I'd like to start by introducing Dr. Nadia Ali. Dr. Ali is the founder of functional integrative medicine practice, Functional Holistic Healing. She's been practicing for 16 years and board certified in internal medicine specialty. She is board certified in integrative medicine, a fellow of the American College of Physicians, and a member of the Institute of Functional Medicine. She also specializes in working with diseases linked with chronic inflammation. She has certifications in other areas as well, and you can find more out about her practice at www.theholistichealing.org. And we also today have licensed professional counselor Andrea Roach with us today. Andrea Roach is a LPC, and she's the founder of Brandywine Counseling, mental health counseling services in Chadsford, PA. She's been practicing for 8 years and a member of the American Association of Christian Counselors. You can find more out about her practice at www.aroachcounseling.com. And so let's go ahead and get to some of the burning questions. Let's start with Dr. Ali. The most worrisome aspect of COVID-19 pandemic is that we have no tools to prevent it. We also do not know the safe medications that can be used for those with mild or moderate infections. Our biggest weapon is the immune system. How does our immune system protect us?
So I think that the most important thing to understand is that we have two major parts of our immune system. So the first part of our immune system is what we call the innate immune system. And this is the part of the immune system which gets into action within minutes of seeing a new bacteria or virus. So, and there are many components of this immune system. The first and foremost component is the barrier component. So every organ has its own barrier to protect it from the bacteria or the virus. For example, the skin is a barrier. The skin prevents any bacteria, fungus, or virus from entering. If the bacteria is able to get into our stomach, then there is acid, which actually takes care of all the bacteria and viruses. If the bacteria or virus tries to enter our lungs or our respiratory system, we have small little tiny structures, which we call cilia, which will actually hold the bacteria or virus and make sure that it does not enter the lung. In addition to that, the innate system has cells, which we call the white blood cells. These cells actually attack every single microorganism like bacteria or virus that enters the body and try to destroy it. At some point in time, the innate system realizes that it is not able to completely overcome that bacteria or virus. So at that time, it shifts to what is called the adaptive immune system. And then we have this system that comes into play. So if you were to look at the differences between these two systems, the innate system takes minutes to hours, but the acquired or adaptive system takes 4 to 7 days. The innate system can attack any bacteria, any virus. It doesn't have any specialized tools, but the acquired system actually has very specific tools. It identifies the exact bacteria, and its weapon actually focuses on the exact bacteria and virus that enters. There are two types of cells in the acquired system. The first is the B cells, and they release antibodies. Antibodies are like bullets, and they actually target the bacteria, and they go ahead, hit the bacteria, and destroy it. On the other hand, the T cells are cells which attach themselves to the bacteria or virus and then destroy it. The good thing about the acquired immunity is that they have what is called memory cells. So it has the power to remember the bacteria or virus that entered the body. So if that bacteria comes again or tries to enter the body again, this time it will not take 4 to 7 days. This time the attack will be immediate because the memory cells which remind the body that we know this enemy from before, so let's attack. The acquired system is also much more powerful than the innate system. However, the immunity generated by the acquired system may be temporary or permanent. So we cannot guarantee that the immunity that's generated by the acquired system will be permanent as opposed to the innate system, which we have at birth and it's lifelong in nature. So when COVID-19 enters our body, both of these systems actually get into action, one after the other. The one component which is common to both, and one of the most important component, is the cytokines. Cytokines are chemical messengers which actually help activate the immune system, and they actually help communication between the innate system and the acquired system. So they are the key components of the immune system.
Why are some people unable to protect themselves from the virus COVID-19?
So that is actually a very good question. So if we have both types of immunity, and if both of them actually come into action, why is it that we still fail sometimes to kind of overcome the infection? So this is a graph which was recently published in April 2020. And this is the mechanism of action in terms of what happens in people who actually go into the high-risk state and who go on to develop failure of their organs such as lungs and heart. So if you see the first phase, this is the phase the virus enters the body. And at this point in time, there are no symptoms. However, the innate system is already active. It's already starting to kill the virus as it sees the virus. Because remember that the innate immunity starts within minutes to hours. So the immune system is already doing its job. However, it's not completely able to contain the virus, and we go on to stage 2. And stage 2 is when you start actually now having symptoms, but they're not severe symptoms. This is the time when your acquired system is now activated and it's starting to produce antibodies and T cells. Now, the people who really don't do well are the people who have underlying conditions. In these people, the underlying conditions lead to an underlying inflammation. So when you have a low level of inflammation going on, you already have a lot of cytokines that are in the body. They're circulating in the body. And when COVID-19 comes in, then the amount of cytokine goes actually through the roof. Now the body's ability to control inflammation is lost. So this time, it's not the virus that's causing harm. This time, it's the amount of cytokines that we have produced are actually causing the harm and causing damage to the organs. So that is the reason why these people get into trouble. Now, a very important concept that this rheumatologist Leonard Calabrese talks about in his paper, he talks about the concept of immunological aging. So we all know our chronological ages from the time of birth till now, that's a chronological age. He says that you don't have to be old to have an old immune system. You can actually be young and have a very old immune system. And this is precisely what happens, that even if you are young, but your immune system is actually old, you will not be able to deal with this COVID-19 very well. So immunological aging is the key to understanding who actually will be affected and who will not be affected. Unfortunately, we do not have any tools other than knowing what disease the person has to kind of provide you your exact immunological age. So that is why some people actually get hit so hard with COVID-19.
So now that a lot of us are worried about contracting COVID-19, this stress itself is affecting our immune system. Dr. Ali, what do you think we can do to let go of some of our fears that we have no control over?
So I agree that we are dealing with a lot of uncertainty. There are uncertainties at multiple levels. There's personal level. We don't know if we will contract the infection. We don't know how severe the infection is going to be. There's uncertainty about our financial situation. There's uncertainty about when all of this is going to be over. How will it affect us as a nation? However, there's one other thing that I think we need to be able to admit, and that is that when we have uncertainty, we feel a lack of control. But we are not necessarily going to be able to control everything. We have to admit that there are things we can control and there are things we cannot control. And this is not the first time in the history of mankind that we are dealing with things that we cannot control. We have dealt with epidemics before. We have dealt with conflicts before. So if we have dealt with uncertainty before and still been able to survive, there's no reason for us to think that we cannot survive this time. This can also be said about the personal level. I don't think any one of us can claim that we could control everything in our lives. There have been many things we cannot control in our life, and this is one of those things. So the first thing is to let go of that which we cannot control. We have done that before. We have dealt with uncertainty before. And so be able to letting go of that which we cannot control helps us, be at ease and be able to focus on what we can control. The second thing is that as humans, we sometimes focus on the worst case scenario. We think the world is going to come to an end, everything is going to be so bad, etc., etc. However, if we concentrate on the best case scenario, what would happen if everything were to go in the right direction? If we think of the best case scenario, we might be able to calm ourselves. We might be able to look at things more pragmatically and think that, look, if this is not necessarily what's going to happen, that is not what's going to happen. It's going to be somewhere in between. And that gives us the confidence to be able to move forward and not be paralyzed with uncertainty. And as we have said before, that focusing on what you can control, there are lots of things that you can control. We can control how much we kind of take care of ourselves, how much we strengthen our immunity with our diet and our behavior and our physical activity. We can control how much we distance ourselves, how much are we following the social distancing. We can control how we disinfect our surfaces, how do we clean up, making sure that we don't get infected. So if we can control those things, then we should go ahead and do that. We can make sure that we take care of our loved ones who need our help. And those are the things that if you can focus on, you will realize that you're doing your part and you are contributing what you possibly can to not make the situation worse. And last but not least, I think actually the most powerful tool that we have to deal with uncertainty is looking within. So I think humans often look for peace, happiness, wisdom outside them. But the most powerful source of peace, most powerful source of calmness is inside you. It's our spirit. If we can connect with our spirit, if we can connect with our soul, we can definitely deal with the uncertainty. What does that mean? That simply means that if we can go on and do meditation between 20 and 40 minutes a day, you can go ahead and do yoga, you can do Tai Chi, Qigong, all of these techniques which are based on breathing. Actually, once you do that, you connect with the most powerful source of peace within you. And that would anchor you and that would help you overcome this uncertainty. And that is something I recommend for everybody on a regular basis. And this is also one way you can strengthen your immune system.
Now that we know things that we can do about uncertainty, however, COVID-19 has changed the way we live, we work, we worship, and the way we communicate with others. How has that affected our physical health, Dr. Ali?
So yes, COVID-19 has definitely affected our physical health, and you can see isolation day 1 and isolation day 30 does look quite different. So I think if we look at the consequences, physical consequences of COVID-19, one of the most important things that has happened is that we have lost our work-home boundary or school-home boundary. We are sitting at home and trying to do everything from the same space. And that has implications. The implication is that we can lose our focus, we can lose our concentration. And we will actually have a hard time being able to cope with things because there are so many things we are trying to do at one time, which we were actually not doing before, including learning new technology. The second thing that has happened is that the screen time has significantly increased because everybody is trying to do everything virtually, including social connection. So that is giving rise to what we call computer vision syndrome. We find a lot of people complaining about strained eyes, dry eyes, blurry vision, headaches. There's an issue with posture because like we are hunched over like that when we're sitting in front of the computer. So we have neck pain, we have back pain. People are also gaining weight because of a couple of reasons. First, we are more sedentary. We are not going outside. And secondly, we have access. We have access to food as many times as we want. And we are often making wrong choices or snack choices. So we are gaining weight. And we also know that increasing screen time has actually impaired cognition function. And so what the work that we used to do in 8 hours would actually require 10 hours if our cognitive ability is impaired. And last but not least, this weight gain and sitting in front of the screen actually can increase our risk for heart disease and diabetes. So definitely there are physical changes that we're going to encounter and those will have future implications. But there are some very easy ways that you can actually overcome them. The most important thing is that you have a dedicated space for where you're working so that you enter that space at a particular time, you exit that space. And when you exit that space, you don't exit it just physically, you exit it emotionally as well. You exit it intellectually as well, meaning no longer will you be thinking about your work. You have a schedule, so you're not all over the place. There's a time when you will go in, there's a time when you'll come out for lunch because that's a space for work, that's not for eating. So when you are eating, you're really focusing on eating. You're not focusing on the computer while you're trying to eat. You take your breaks, and the breaks are especially important because not only do they limit the screen time, but they actually help give a break to your eyes. So there's something called a 20-20-20 rule. So for every 20 minutes that you spend looking at the screen, you should look at something 20 feet away for about 20 seconds. And it would be nice if you can get up and walk around at the time. So you're not constantly sitting, stretch a little bit so you can exercise your muscles and make sure that you look at your posture. The other thing that you can do to make sure that you don't gain weight is to make sure that you have access to healthy snacks. It's not a problem if you eat multiple times, as long as you're eating healthy stuff. And more importantly, make sure that you are doing physical activity, 30 to 60 minutes a day. And we talked about yoga, we talked about qigong. All of these are activities which include meditative element, and they include breathing, and they include physical activity. So pick something that you like and stick with it. So those are the things that will make sure that you avoid the adverse physical consequences of being quarantined.
Now that we've looked at how COVID-19 has affected our physical health, I'd like to ask Andrea, how has COVID-19 affected our emotional health?
There are two emotional consequences of COVID-19. First, the social isolation, and the second is spending extended period of time in close proximity with family members, which can lead to stress. So social isolation breeds fear, and we can combat fear with human connection. We know that human connection is important, but human connection is not only about talking, it's also about looking at facial expressions. It's also about this point in time, because we cannot visit each other, we can't touch each other, at least we can see each other. And that is what we would like to accomplish. But the connection may not be adequate if we can't see the face of the person or their gestures or their smile. The best way to connect this way is doing video calls, Skype, Zoom, because that is when you can actually feel like you have the person in front of you. Other examples to connect would be playing online games with friends, attending online church services, or even fostering a pet. The second way to address social isolation is expressing emotions. A lot of times our conversations are task-oriented. We want to get something done. But when we express love and appreciation of another person, you will actually feel the connection much more with that person, much more than if you just ask them if everything is okay with them. So expressing your emotions will also negatively reinforce that connection. The other issue that I mentioned is living in close proximity with household members. So while engaging in activities that involve all members is important, personal time to refuel your tank is equally as important. So how do we create boundaries without hurting the other person's feelings? We must remember to communicate our needs respectfully, clearly, letting them know when you need your space with no interruptions due to important meetings, for example, versus when you can be flexible and interruptions would be okay.
So, Dr. Ali, can we say that fear and stress are negative emotions?
Actually, we cannot say that, because fear and stress to some degree is what we need. If there is no fear and there is no stress, people will get bored. They will not put any effort into doing anything. So if you look at this graph, when you have low stress and low fear, there's boredom. There is no attention. There is lack of attention. So as the fear and stress goes up, your performance actually gets better. However, the problem comes when the fear and the stress overwhelms the human being, which means that at this point in time, instead of focusing on what you need to do, you're only focused on what will not go right. And you are paralyzed by that, and that's when your performance actually comes down significantly. So it is not about elimination of fear or stress. It is about having optimal level of fear and stress, and it is about not getting overwhelmed with fear and stress. So if you see that we have two systems in our body which make up the autonomic nervous system. The first is the sympathetic nervous system, or the fight and flight system. The second is parasympathetic, which is rest, heal, and digest system. So when we get into fear and we get into anxiety, our blood pressure goes up, our heart rate goes up, blood sugar goes up, we become more alert and vigilant, and we have some degree of inflammation at that time. But then when our fear and stress comes down, we go into the parasympathetic mode, in which case there is blood pressure comes down, heart rate comes down, blood sugar comes down, inflammation comes down, and your digestion actually gets better. Now, digestion is very important for the immune system because 80 to 90% of our immune system actually is right there around a digestive system. Imagine if somebody is in the flight and fight mode all the time. They're always stressed and they're always anxious. What's going to happen? You are constantly expecting the heart to pump up. Constantly blood pressure is up. Constantly sugar is up. Constantly your breathing is actually rapid. And there is no time for your digestive system to be able to repair. And your adrenal system, which is required in the fight or flight, is also constantly working. What is going to happen in this individual? This individual is in a constant degree of inflammation. Their lungs are tired, the heart is tired, adrenals are tired, digestive system is not repaired, not healed. All the systems that you need for your immunity are actually at a loss right now. This is the person who is at more risk of cytokine storm. which is what we talked about before, that if you have cytokine storm because you have an underlying inflammation, your ability to overcome COVID-19 is not going to be adequate. So that is what we want to make sure that does not happen. And that is the reason why we're talking about stress and we're talking about anxiety and what are we supposed to do, which are what we call external factors which affect the autonomic nervous system.
Dr. Ali mentioned excessive stress and fear being an issue. Andrea, how do we regulate these fearful and stressful emotions?
So just like when we are sick and take our body's temperature, when we find ourselves irritated or stressed or anxious, we should set aside some time and take our emotional temperature and ask, why am I irritated? Because irritation is an outcome of something that is going on. So many reasons that can lead to irritation. So there should be a part of the day when you engage with your emotions and assess your feelings and giving yourself about 5-10 minutes during the day and ask yourself, what emotions am I feeling? Am I feeling anger? Am I feeling sadness, stress, worry? Then ask, why am I stressed? What is making me stressed? So first you identified your emotions and the reasons behind them. And the next step then is ask, who can I seek help from? And if you cannot identify your emotions and reasons behind them, then no way you can resolve the issue and you won't feel better. So some of the reasons that you might be feeling stress right now is because maybe someone is encroaching in your space, maybe because you feel that you are on the hook for 24 hours taking care of children, working from home, homeschooling or cooking. Maybe you haven't been sleeping well because you're upset that yours have been canceled, situation have been canceled, or you're missing connecting with friends. So coming up with solutions that address the need that you identified is key here.
What if we find our emotional temperature is very anxious? What can we do to deal with it? How can we overcome that anxiety and that high emotional temperature?
So our anxiety most of the time stems from negative self-talk. What happens is self-critic. And that inner self-critic always telling us how things are not going right. It tells us how we won't be able to handle or deal with a situation. So the reason our inner critic is telling us this is not because it's worried. It worries that we may make a mistake or we won't do the right thing. It's trying to protect us, but sometimes it actually paralyzes us and overwhelms us. So at that time, what we can do is talk to our self-critic, and I hear what you're saying and I appreciate it, but I also think that there's another way to look at what you're telling me. So for example, you might say to yourself, I'm stuck in the house. I can't believe I'm stuck in a house. I don't think I can deal with this. And then you can say, yeah, however, I think I can get through this. I think I can make use of this time. I can clean my closet, take a course online. So what you did here was not only you listened to your critic, you also responded to it. Something. So I think this is one of the very strong strategies that we can utilize because it helps us to take the most advantage of the difficult situation that we are in. And the other thing you can do is to recall and relive a pleasurable, joyful, happy memory. For example, if you can think of a food you enjoyed as a child, or playing a particular game, an activity you found enjoyable, such as dancing. When you recall and focus on these positive memories, you will invoke positive emotions.
So now that we learned how to address our stress and anxiety, let's move on to another important variable that affects our immune system, the food we eat. Dr. Ali, does the food affect our immune system?
So I think that we all know from very early on as a child, when we are little babies, we are breastfed, right? And the whole idea of breastfeeding is that we know that breast milk is excellent for the baby. We know that babies who are breastfed, they will not get a lot of infections. We also know that if a baby who's being breastfed does get infected, that infection will not actually last long. And the reason is because breast milk provides a lot of factors which bring immunity to the baby. For example, we know that antibodies are passed through the breast milk. We know that there are other things in the breast milk which feed the good bacteria. So the food that we have first thing after coming into this world gives us immunity. So we know that the connection between food and immunity has been there for a very long period of time. So foods can be inflammatory, meaning that they induce inflammation, and foods can be anti-inflammatory, which means that they reduce inflammation. And we know that we want to go with foods that are anti-inflammatory because we want to have an immune system which is not already being stressed out by an underlying inflammation. So how does food affect the immune system? There are 4 different ways in which food can impact the immune system. The first and very important is that the immune system is a system which requires nutrients. It requires antioxidants. So example of nutrients would be vitamin C, zinc. It would require antioxidants such as glutathione. It would require vitamin E. So all of these nutrients and antioxidants are going to come from food. If you do not have food which gives you the required nutrients, your immune system is not going to be able to fight. Secondly, very importantly, the food that we eat not only nourishes us, but it's also a fuel for the bacteria inside our gut or our digestive tract. Now remember, I had said before that 80 to 90% of our immune system is in our digestive tract. This immune system in the digestive tract and the bacteria, actually it's a coalition. They work together to make sure that there is no inflammation in that area and the immune system stays calm. But if the food that comes inside is inflammatory, that food completely changes the type of bacteria in the gut. Now you have bacteria which actually cause inflammation. And so now the immune system automatically is going to be triggered because of the type of food coming in. But if the food coming in is anti-inflammatory, it's going to feed the good bacteria and they're loving it. And so they're really doing their job that they're supposed to do. The third mechanism, which is very important, is what we call leaky gut. This is an area which we have a lot of research on right now, and we are finding that there is not a single disease entity that is not linked to leaky gut. And what is leaky gut? So basically the gut is a lining. It's the lining which protects us. So remember that what we eat is foreign, but the gut has the job to make sure that it does not allow any bacteria, any virus, any undigested food or toxin to enter the body. Imagine if this wall, which is supposed to be protective, has holes in it. Now everything which is not supposed to go in is actually entering. And now there is a chain of reaction that's happening. There's inflammation that's happening. The hormone cortisol is going up. There is a lot of toxins entering the body, which is kind of negatively affecting the brain. It could negatively affect the nervous system. It could negatively affect the liver. And so now this leaky gut can actually be the first step in the development of all different kinds of diseases. And there are foods which can actually go ahead, come inside the body, and actually cause leaky gut. So the food is a very powerful tool. It can kill you, and it can actually save you. And it is up to you how you would want to use that tool. So what are some of the inflammatory foods? So the first thing I would mention is the category of sugar. Sugar in any form is inflammatory. It doesn't matter if it is organic. It doesn't matter if it is coming from palm trees or some other tree. Sugar is sugar is sugar. The important part is also to understand that just because you are eating something natural, which has natural sugar, even if that comes in excessive quantities, then it's a problem. There's also a discussion about sugar substitutes. Sugar substitutes also increase insulin and blood sugar. They also negatively impact the bacteria. So when you are buying something, the most important thing you can do is look at the label and see the amount of sugar. If sugar has been added, you're right there, you're going to stop and you're going to leave that item. If they say there is no additional sugar, you can still look at the amount of sugar inside it. And if it is more than 7 grams, you really have to think about whether you want to get that or not. So sugar is the biggest culprit. And unfortunately, these days, sugar is in everything, pretty much. The second category is trans fat. So trans fat is a form of fat which is present in processed foods, particularly if you look at the label and if it says that it's partially hydrogenated vegetable oil, that is where trans fat is. So French fries, fast food that we eat, all of those contain trans fat. Trans fat is extremely inflammatory and has been very well known to cause cardiovascular disease or heart disease and diabetes as well. So definitely stay away from trans fat. The third category is processed meat. Examples of that is hot dogs, bacon, deli meats, sausages. The reason why there's a problem with these meats is that a lot of them contain nitrates and nitrites. Now, even if it says there is no nitrate and nitrite, it simply means that the concentration of nitrate and nitrite is low. It does not mean that it's zero. So avoid processed meats because they have been linked to heart disease, linked to diabetes, and when they are heated at high temperature, these meats actually release certain chemicals such as polycyclic amines, heterocyclic amines, which are very well-known cancer-causing agents, and they can cause stomach cancer, they can cause colon cancer. And last but not least is the category of long-term alcohol use. We know that alcohol directly affects the T cells. If you remember my initial discussion, I had talked about the adaptive immune system, and I had said that it consists of B cells and T cells. So T cells are the killer cells, which kills the bacteria and viruses. And if you are a chronic alcohol drinker, your T cells will be very weak and will not be able to perform the function. Alcohol is also directly toxic to the liver. It can cause scarring of the liver. It can cause inflammation of the liver. And of course, once you have scarring of the liver, then you can actually get liver cancer as well. Alcohol hits the pancreas, putting you at higher risk for diabetes. It is directly toxic to the brain. It can definitely cause dementia. It can cause nerve damage. It can also directly cause toxicity to the muscles of the heart. And that is what we call alcohol-associated cardiomyopathy, which is damage to the heart cells from alcohol. Alcohol actually causes an imbalanced bacteria in the gut, leading to chronic inflammation. And this is one of the things not known to a lot of people, but alcohol can actually lead to increased risk of pneumonia, TB, viral infections. And so if you're concerned about COVID-19 and you want to protect your lungs, then you know very well what you need to do. So those are the 4 groups which we know across the board cause a lot of damage. However, remember that we say that one man's medicine is another man's poison, because again, everybody is different. So what we need to have an individualized anti-inflammatory diet plan. So we know for sure that there are certain things that are anti-inflammatory in nature. For example, creating a rainbow on your plate. So the number of colors on your plate, the more the colors, the better it is, because every color in nature represents a different nutrient. So if you have a lot of colors on your plate, you're getting a lot of different nutrients. If you're having grains, make sure you're having whole grains and not refined grains. Nuts are good as long as they're not consumed in excessive amounts. And remember, peanut is not a nut, it's a legume. Fish is a source of omega-3s, and omega-3s are very good for inflammation. They're actually anti-inflammatory. Consuming a lot of herbs is very good, whether it's dill, cilantro, parsley, thyme, rosemary. Using spices such as turmeric, those are really some of the things, garlic, onion, really good herbs that you can actually help yourself, help your immune system with, so you can consume that. But remember that these are all anti-inflammatory, but you may need to customize your diet so that it can take into account all the other variables that needs to be taken into account. What I mean by that is that there is no one diet that is perfect for everybody. Every individual needs to have a customized anti-inflammatory diet, which takes into account the following. Number one, the genetics. We are not the same, and so our genes are different, our needs are different. Food sensitivity, we have sensitivity to certain food. If we do, then we need to know what foods are there that our body does not necessarily like and that we need to avoid. What are our nutritional requirements? An athlete's requirements are very different than somebody who actually has Parkinson's disease. They need very different nutrients, and so that needs to be taken into account. What kind of toxin exposure have you had also makes a huge difference. For example, if you've been exposed to mold toxin versus you've been exposed to mercury toxin. Very importantly, what is the capacity of your digestive tract? Can your digestive tract absorb and digest all kinds of foods, or is it better with some foods and not better with other foods? You need to know that. And what kind of gut bacteria do you have? That is also another important variable that needs to be considered when you are looking at an individualized anti-inflammatory diet plan. So it is not necessary that every grain that you eat might be the greatest for your bacteria. There's some grains which may work for your bacteria, some which may not work for your bacteria. So you need to know all of these variables to be able to have a customized or individualized anti-inflammatory diet plan, which would make sure that you get all your nutrients and you prevent a leaky gut.
So, Andrea, any thoughts on the way that we are eating?
As Dr. Ali mentioned, eating healthy food is important. There's another aspect of eating healthy food, which is how we eat it. And it brings us to the concept of mindful eating. So when you're eating, are you consumed with a lot of thoughts, or are you actually concentrating on what you're eating? Because if you're thinking about everything else other than what you're eating, you're not concentrating on chewing and you're not really enjoying it, enjoying the food. The concept of mindful eating is to be able to enjoy the food and to taste, smell, and relish what you are eating and paying attention to it. Another thing that you can do is say grace before you eat, because that brings an attitude of gratefulness and reduces anxiety. It also fosters positive thinking. Instead of focusing on what you don't have, you're focusing on what you do have.
So I would like to take this time to mention the topic of our next webinar. Leaky gut and intestinal permeability. Dr. Ali had mentioned this when she was discussing food and the immune system. So some of our objectives that we are going to cover are: what is leaky gut? What is the connection between leaky gut and inflammation? How does leaky gut lead to autoimmune diseases? What is the role of leaky gut in diabetes, obesity, and heart disease? Can leaky gut lead to anxiety, depression, and neurological disorders? And what are the causes of leaky gut? And can leaky gut be reversed? Our next webinar will be in 4 weeks. So that's Saturday, May 16th, 2020 at 4 p.m. Saturday, May 16th. That's on the slide for you. Go ahead and mark that down on your calendar. And you will receive an email to register for this webinar. Please make sure that you register for this webinar, since we will have limited seats available. So it looks like we already have some questions. So I'm going to go ahead and start. So if you want to go ahead, anybody has any more questions, please feel free to type them in the question and answer section. I'm going to go ahead and start with these. Does our immunity naturally weaken as we age, or can this be prevented? Dr. Ali.
So our immunity does weaken as we age. There's no question about it. However, there are many different ways in which you can strengthen your immune system. So the reason why our immunity actually weakens with age is because some of our systems starts to become weaker. For example, the adrenal system starts to get weaker. So if we can strengthen that, our digestive system gets weaker. So our nutrients actually are affected by that. So if we can, there are ways to figure out what is the degree of inflammation, which we can actually improve to improve our immune system. We can work out in terms of what kind of nutrients do we need that would help our immune system. We can also work on our endocrine system, which also affects our immune system. So those are the ways that you can actually strengthen your immune system. So just because you are 60 years old or 70 years or 80 years old does not mean that you should have a weak immune system if you've actually worked on your immune system.
How do we get rid of mold and or Lyme's? I'd like to refer you to the Holistic Healing website, where you can find out more about the functional approach on how you can resolve these issues. We will also be doing a webinar on both of these topics in the near future. Feel free to set up a complimentary 15-minute consultation with Dr. Ali to see if that is the best fit for you. Next question. I have relapsing polychondritis and would like to control flares without immunosuppressant.
Yes, you can control relapsing polychondritis, which is an autoimmune condition, and without necessarily using immunosuppressants. The functional approach to autoimmune disease is to know what is the root cause. Any chronic disease can be reversed as long as you can figure out what the root cause is. If you cannot figure out the root cause, then basically you are just doing band-aiding. You can band-aid with medications, you can band-aid with supplements as well. So if you really want to get off of your immunosuppressants, you will need to go with a functional approach. You will need to find out why you have the problem. And once you identify the problem, then you go ahead and address the root cause, and then you will be able to get off of your immunosuppressants.
If we currently have a weakened immune system, does that mean we will always have one? And if we were to get pregnant with a weak immune system, what would happen?
So just because you have a weak immune system does not mean that you can strengthen it. And I think I said before that if you are like old aged, that doesn't mean that you have to have a weak immune system. If you work on your immune system, you can make sure that it remains strong. Before you get pregnant, I think I've always stressed this, and we do have a lot of our patients who actually come to us when they're planning to get pregnant, because they want to know that the soil in which you are going to be giving birth is fertile. You want to make sure that you have all the nutrients that you need, because you are the ones That's going to be the source of nutrients for your baby. Also, your bacteria will also be the bacteria which will be the first bacteria that will enter the baby's body. So you want to make sure that before you get pregnant, you make sure that your immune system and overall your system is in an optimal state for you to be able to give birth to your baby, because a lot is dependent on you. And you don't want your baby to suffer because of issues that you had. If you have a weakened immune system and you are pregnant, there are a number of issues that can happen. The question is, what is the degree of impairment of your immune system? It will depend on what is the degree of inflammation in your immune system. We know now that women who have underlying immune conditions, their children could have issues such as autism. Their children could have more asthma issues. So you need to know the outcome would depend on what is the degree of breakdown of your immune system. So there is no way to predict it unless we're able to figure out what is the degree of breakdown. And of course, if you have an impaired immune system and if you get an infection during pregnancy, it would adversely affect your baby for obvious reasons. And if you take an antibiotic, as you know that most pregnant women cannot take a lot of medications because they are contraindicated in pregnancy. But if you take an antibiotic for whatever reason, that's going to affect your good bacteria, which will affect your body's bacteria, your baby's bacteria as well. So if you are going to get pregnant, then make sure that before you get pregnant, you take care of the issues, not after, because after it becomes very limiting. Because after, you really have to be careful with what you put in your body. You really cannot put everything in your body once you're pregnant, and there are only limited options.
Can an MTHFR gene mutation be overcome to help the body detox and thereby reduce inflammation?
MTHFR mutation is a mutation which is a methylation defect, which means that your body's ability to methylate vitamins, nutrients, and other processes in your body is limited. Just because if you have an MTHFR does not necessarily mean that you will have a disease. It simply means that your ability to methylate is limited, which means your ability to overcome inflammation and detox is limited. And yes, even if you have an MTHFR, that does not mean that you have to suffer. There are a lot of things that you can do to make sure that you have all the stuff that you need, all the nutrients that you need, and they are given to you in a methylated form so that you never have to deal with a lot of inflammation and you have enough capacity to detox.
Does leaky gut make you more susceptible to severe symptoms of the coronavirus?
Yes. If you have leaky gut, you will have chronic inflammation. And if you have chronic inflammation, you are going to be at risk of the cytokine storm simply because you have an underlying current.
I have a slightly low IgA due to celiac. Am I more susceptible to severe symptoms if I were to contract COVID-19?
So it is not necessary that everybody who has celiac is going to have low IgA. Low IgA is an indicator that the immune system is not optimal. And anybody that has a less than optimal immune system should be worried that if they contract COVID-19, it might become severe because of the immune system not being optimal.
How might our immunity be compromised by elements in our environment, such as air quality and quality of water?
I think that's an excellent question. It's very interesting that we now have data to show that people who live in cities, actually with a lot of pollution, are at risk of heart disease. And the reason why that is the case is because the air that you are breathing, actually has a ton of toxins. And the more toxins that enter your system, these toxins actually can create inflammation. And that actually can affect your immune system. Not only can it affect your immune system, it can actually affect a lot of other organs in your body. So definitely the air that we breathe in plays a very important role. And I think some of us have seen those pictures of LA before and after quarantine, and the skies look very different. And of course, when we were in that environment with a lot of smoke and a lot of pollution, all of that was going inside our lungs. So definitely the air that we breathe in makes a huge impact. And that goes with water as well, because remember that the water could be a source of toxins such as lead and other organic toxins. For example, there could be pesticides in water, there could be herbicides in water, and they have a potential effect. They can actually cause leaky gut, they can actually cause neurological damage. So there is no question that our environment plays a very important role. And I think it's also a variable where we have the least control, because we can probably buy organic food. And of course, we always talk about the issues with that. But how are we going to change the air that we breathe in? How will we change that? Because until and unless everybody's on the same page about it, we will not be able to really do much about the air we breathe in. We can do something about the water to some degree. But yes, these are all the variables which definitely affect us.
I have a 10,000 ANA titrate as a result of a lifetime of mercury toxicity from my fillings. They were removed in 1998, but I still have elevated ANA titrate and developed an arthritis cervical spine. I would like to know what to do to reduce the inflammation and ANA titrate.
So I realize that you have very high ANA titers, and you have mercury toxicity that have been removed. So removing mercury fillings does not mean that mercury is out of your system. Remember that mercury actually gets inside your body, and one of the best and its favorite organ is the brain. So, and of course, it also affects other systems, including the liver. That's where the detox actually happens. So reversing of ANA titer requires an assessment of what is the source of inflammation. It requires an assessment of what is the degree of toxicity right now. Is the toxicity because of mercury or something else that's going on in your body? And until and unless you are able to identify the root cause of why your ANA is elevated, there's no power on earth that can reverse your ANA. So again, I think that the issue is that we live in conventional medicine and we breathe conventional medicine. And so we're always looking for that one thing that we can do to kind of reverse anything and everything that we have, because we have a one pill, one disease model that we believe in. But that is the model that has actually failed in chronic disease, because that model can band-aid the problem. That model cannot solve the problem, because if you can't figure out the root cause of the problem, there's no way you will ever solve the problem. And so you need to be able to figure out what toxins are in your system. Clearly, an ANA of 1,000 or over 1,000 or over 10,000 is a marker that there's underlying inflammation going on. And definitely there is production of antibody that's ongoing. So there is something that's causing it. And you need to know what is it.
I'd like to answer this next question. Might the intensity of COVID-19 illness / extent of the cytokine storm be influenced by the amount of viruses one is exposed to?
No question about it. No question about it that, we talked about this last time, that, healthcare workers often have very severe infection, and that's because the whole day they're encountering people who have COVID-19, and day after day they're getting exposed. So definitely if you have much higher exposure, your amount of inflammation is going to go up. There's no question about it.
Okay. And I have, bear with me, ankylosing spondylitis, and I'm wondering if I am more vulnerable to COVID, even though I am not taking any biologics or other medications.
So basically, the issue is, I think I've said this before, that diagnosis, when we define diagnosis in conventional medicine, we are talking about a group of symptoms. And if you have a group of symptoms, then you will get a diagnosis, whether it be chronic fatigue or fibromyalgia. The diagnosis does not tell us anything about what's going on inside your system. So when somebody says, I have ankylosing spondylitis, what they're saying is that they have an autoimmune condition. And one of the most defining features of autoimmune condition is underlying inflammation. So the question is then, what is the degree of inflammation that you have? And that it will determine how you would respond to COVID-19, not by a title that you have received from your doctor that you have ankylosing spondylitis, or you have, hypothyroidism, or you have X, Y, and Z. That simply means that there's a number that's off, or maybe there's a symptom that's going on. But the real thing you have to ask is, what is going on inside the body? Which, like I said before, I think my first or second slide, I said that, what is your immunological age? How much has that actually aged from the underlying inflammation? That is the key. If somehow we can determine the immunological age, we can tell you exactly how prone you are. And your immunological age has to do with what's going on as far as the underlying inflammation is going on. And some people may have a lot of inflammation, but they may not have a diagnosis. So we have a lot of people who come and they say, oh, I have seen 8 people, 8 physicians, and 8 specialists, and everybody has told them everything is perfectly fine. But when they come, we see markers of inflammation very high. So they don't have a diagnosis, but they actually are at very high risk because they have a lot of underlying inflammation. So a diagnosis means nothing. What if you have symptoms and nobody can diagnose you? Does that mean that you are perfectly okay and nothing will happen to you and you're not in the high risk category? No, that does not mean that. That simply means that, conventional medicine does not have a term for the symptoms that you have. It doesn't mean that everything is perfectly all right. So a diagnosis really means nothing. What you need to know is what is going on inside the system, and that will determine how will you respond to a particular pathogen, whether it be a bacteria or a virus.
Thank you so much. That was very informative. And I would like to thank both of our panelists today, and thank everyone for attending. We wish you well, and we hope to see you in about 4 weeks. Thank you so much.
Thank you.